I cannot hold back my story for fear of what man can do to me.
Reveille, reveille, all hands heave out.
Has there ever been a time in your life when you realized no one was coming to save you? Have you ever been backed into a corner in your life and realized you were going to have to step up and be your own hero? Then welcome to the Perfectly Flawed podcast. On this show, we lift the voices of individuals who have overcome adversity and give them a platform to share their powerful stories of perseverance. It might just be what you need to motivate yourself into taking the next important step of becoming your own hero. Now, welcome to the show, the host of the Perfectly Flawed podcast, Navy veteran Janae Sergio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Perfectly Flawed podcast. The story you're about to hear today is one of true strength. I met Valerie Foglesong a few months ago at the Pink Beret retreat, and we had a very intimate conversation about her story with military sexual trauma. I believe it was one of the first times she outwardly told her story. I remember Val telling me that she would one day like to use her story to help others, but she wasn't ready at the time to share it. She is one of the reasons I started the Perfectly Flawed podcast, and it was only fitting that she be my first guest. I want to give people a safe space to share their stories. I'm incredibly honored that Val is opening up for the first time ever on my podcast and assure you that her story is one you need to sit down and brace yourself for. Val is a married mom of two, Army veteran, and co-pioneer of the Pink Beret archery program, which you will hear more about on our next episode. Welcome, Val. It's an honor to have you.
Hi. Thank you for having me today. It's a privilege.
Thank you for being here. Val, may I ask where you're from and where you currently live?
I am actually from Texas, a little town called Alvin. It's pretty south, but I currently live in Conroe, which is north of Houston.
Nice. So you're not too far from me.
Mm-mm.
Tell us a little bit about your childhood and life before the Army.
So I would say I had a pretty normal upbringing. I mean, no kid really knows what's normal, but for me, it was normal. I had, two parents, they're still together. And I grew up with a very supportive family. I was homeschooled for a while and then went to public school in high school, which was a little bit of a culture shock. But I always knew that I wanted to be in the Army. So when I was a little kid, I would sneak under the blankets and watch MASH because I wanted to be an Army nurse and work in the OR and do all the things. So that was always my goal. Parents were supportive of that. I joined the Army as delayed entry. Mm-hmm. So, and as a senior in high school, I decided that's what I was going to do. Life takes you on a strange journey sometimes. So it was a little bit windy getting there, but that's not what we're here to talk about. But I did experience, a few things in high school that kind of shaped the way that I thought about relationships and people and men in general. So I think some of that played into my story as well, what happened to me while I was in the Army. So I joined out of the MEPS in Houston, and that was pretty much it. That was in 1997.
1997. And so you joined, so delayed entry program, for those who don't know what that is, that's you can join prior to turning 18, and then you kind of work with the recruiters up until it's time to actually ship out, right, to boot camp.
Right.
So how long were you in the delayed entry program for?
I honestly think it was probably half of my senior year because I had to be 18 to sign up. So I think about 6 or 7 months, and then I left that late summer after my senior year. Mm-hmm.
How long did you serve in the Army?
I reenlisted one time, so my total time served was a little over 5 years. So I reenlisted right at the 3-year mark when my window opened to do so, and I did another 2 years after that.
Very nice. And thank you for your service.
Thank you.
What did you do in the Army? You said that you watched MASH and you wanted to be a nurse. Is that what you ended up finally going for? Or did you take my route and go supply?
I kind of, it was a little bit windy. I didn't actually become a registered nurse until I got out of the Army. But I did join as medical. Originally, they were trying to make me be a cook. They said, you can join and you can work in the hospital, but you can be a hospital cook. And I said, no, thanks. So I ended up going in as a 91 Bravo. I think they've changed it since then, but it was a 91 Bravo, which is a combat medic.
Oh, okay. So you explained to me a little bit about your story, and it was absolutely heart-wrenching. I appreciate that you are wanting to come on here and share your story. So let's go ahead and get right into
Yeah.
it.
Okay. Well, thank you for listening.
Yeah, yes. I'll go ahead and open up the floor and let you share the best way you feel safe sharing.
Okay. Um, you know, I do want to give a little trigger warning. So if you are listening to this and you have been through this situation, or you maybe have little ones around, you may want to put your earbuds in. I do feel like I need to be as transparent as possible, because to show that I'm not ashamed of what happened to me, that it wasn't my fault. And I realize
Absolutely.
that now, a lot of years later. So the reason I'm doing this is because I don't want anybody to go through what I've gone through, what my marriage has gone through. Some of it may be unavoidable, but it doesn't have to go on so long. I waited a long time to get any help. So initially, when I got out of basic training, and I'll try not to take too many rabbit trails, but when I got out of basic training, I went to combat medic school, then was stationed at Fort Huachuca, Arizona, which is way out in the desert. Beautiful post. 18 years old. Actually, I think I just turned 19. And you get there and you're immersed in all of the things, all of the people, and you're young and you don't really know very much, but you think you know everything. At least I did. So I met somebody actually at what they called the NCO club. So we would go there. Fort Huachuca's drinking age was actually 18,
Okay.
because it was so close to Mexico. So I think in an attempt to keep soldiers from going to Mexico, they lowered the drinking age. On post was 18. I don't know if it's still the same, but it was. So there was not an issue with younger soldiers, especially girls, going to the NCO club. You could drink on post. It was actually safer that way in their mind, I guess. But I met somebody there. He was older than me, and we danced and had a great time and didn't think anything of it other than we were having a great time. And he came to the hospital, actually, if I recall, a couple days later. He found, it was a small post. He knew where I worked. I told him I was new and this is where I was working. So we kind of struck up a relationship, and before I knew it, it was quick, probably within a couple of weeks, he was claiming me as his girlfriend. And I didn't really think much of it, that he was so much older and that he had a child. And why do you live on post housing if you're single? And he had an answer for everything. So it was like, no, I'm not married, I'm divorced, and I only have this post housing because my child comes sometimes. And I just believed everything he said, basically. And I had friends, new friends. I mean, again, I was new there, and they would tell me, he's married, right? And I said, no, he's divorced. He had an answer for everything, even to the extent of the lies was incredible. In hindsight, I can't even believe. And I look at my younger self, my 19-year-old self, and think, what were you thinking? But I wasn't. So I do feel that I was kind of groomed into this situation, that it just spiraled before I knew it. And a good friend who actually, he was my NCO at my clinic where I worked. And he said, look, I'm just going to tell you as a dad and a friend. He was older. He said, this is bad news and you need to get away from him. And I respected what he said. And he said, I'm promising you that he's married. And everyone was just so stuck on him being married. But in the meantime, he had been treating me pretty crummy. He would yell at me and cuss in my face. And I just thought, you know what? I'm not doing this. So he had gone out of town to visit his family. And he was calling me while he was there. And I was very standoffish. I do remember that, because I was like, okay, while he's gone, I'm going to get my stuff and I'm getting out. Because I was staying at his place occasionally on the weekends. So it wasn't abnormal for me to be missed from the barracks. So I lived in the barracks with the military police and the medics, but it wasn't strange or unusual for me to be gone for the weekend because everyone knew I was hanging out with him. So
So I just a quick question. So
Mhm.
people were saying he was married, but you were able to keep your stuff in his house?
I didn't have much there. I mean, a couple of random pieces of clothing or whatever. I wasn't like I
Okay.
was living there. I only
Okay.
would go there on the weekends. Yeah. I actually never really stayed there more than a day at a time. Like, I
But I
wanted to
could
see.
see, yeah, I could
Yeah.
see why you would think that he wasn't married,
Yeah,
you
because
know?
there was no, so there's a reason why, because the house was almost empty and it looked like a bachelor pad. There wasn't any really evidence of anyone else being there. And the reason for that is because he was actually on orders to ETS and they had already packed up all of her things. So this is how he was getting away with that.
I see.
But I found that out later, of course.
Mhm.
So when I would go there, it just looked like, oh, he has a kid. Here's some pictures of her. She had a room with a crib. It seemed legit to me at the time. So he's calling me from his leave, and I just decided, like, I'm not as dumb as I was acting at that time. Honestly, that's kind of how I felt. Like, this is dumb. Why are you doing this? You have no reason to put up with this. So while he's gone, let's just go get our stuff. I'm like pep talking myself real big. I'm gonna go with my backpack and get my few things out of there. Um, and that was my plan. So I had been driving his car while he was gone, drove to his house, went inside, got my stuff. Didn't plan to leave a note, nothing. I was just going to disappear and basically say, like, nope, don't call me anymore. And was hoping that would be the end of it. I assumed it would be. I had no reason to really be afraid of him
Mhm.
at that point. So I am walking through the galley kitchen out the back door, and there's like a big note and a card open on the counter. And, I'm not normally a nosy person, but I certainly looked at it, and it was from his wife, who was currently having their second child. And that's where he was on his leave. And so, of course, it just solidified, like, oh my God, I have to get out of here. And this is not good. Everybody was right. And, you feel embarrassed, but also like, okay, I'm getting out of here. And so the note went on to say, basically, that's how I found out that he was ETSing to Korea, which is why her stuff wasn't there, because when you go to Korea, if you know anything about that, you usually go by yourself. You don't take your family. So her stuff was gone. His stuff was there because he was going to Korea and she went home. So it all made sense after the fact, right? So I'm heading out the back door and thinking, like, this a-hole, and I get to the
You're
back
allowed to
door.
cuss. You can cuss on my
Oh, well, he was
podcast.
an asshole.
Okay.
So I get to the back door, put my hand on the door, and I'll never forget, he just kind of popped in the window, and I was like, play it cool. I'm walking out this door. And I think he knew. I mean, he saw my backpack, saw my face. I think he knew what was going on, but I still didn't realize that I needed to be fearful of anything. By that time I was mad, and I was like, you are a liar. This is not good. And I'm not about that. And you have a family, like, this is ridiculous. And so he pushed his way into the house and locked the door, and he said, you're not going anywhere. Yeah. So, sorry. I didn't really know exactly how to handle that initially. I was like, okay, what does that mean? But I knew from prior experience that he had a tendency to get angry really quickly. And so I was like, well, if I play nice, maybe I can get out of the situation. So I just said, I need some space. Like, let's work this out later. I just wanted out of the house. I just wanted out. No intentions of working anything out, but he knew that. So I do believe, and if you know anything about trauma, sometimes memories are spotty. So sometimes the timeline, I'm like, well, I don't know if that was Friday night or Saturday morning. Like, things are still fuzzy, and I'm working through that now again. But I do believe it was pretty late on a Friday night when he actually got home, because I was not expecting him that night. So it was a shock. So over the course of that night, he was drinking a lot. I was not drinking. I was sort of pretending to drink, like, let's take a shot. And I'm like throwing it behind my back. And trying to figure out a way, if he's drunk enough or goes to sleep, I can leave. I knew what was probably coming. And so we did end up in his bedroom, and over the course of the entire weekend, he raped and sodomized me several times. I lost count. I honestly don't know. And every time I thought, if I just go to another place, this isn't happening, I would just kind of check out. And the things that he would say, I don't feel comfortable sharing. Nobody really needs to know that. But those things are what later triggered all the memories and things. And that's a huge part of the story. So after that, he would make me take a shower and stand in the shower. And I was looking at the little tiny window, like, how can I get out of this window? Like, anything I can do to get out of here. I was in a lot of pain. I still have physical scars from what happened. So I did the best I could to try to get out. I have no idea. I had no concept of time, really, what time it was, if it was daytime or nighttime, to be real honest. And oddly enough, he had a waterbed. It was so long ago that he had a waterbed. But every time I moved, the bed would move. So he would clamp down harder and shove my head down or my neck down. So I couldn't get up. And he was much bigger than me. I mean, it's a giant man. So finally, I realized, after being pulled back down 5 or 6 times, that I had to wait until he was fully asleep. And I would have to go from laying flat on my back to bolting out the door. I wasn't going to be able to sneak out. And so that's what I did. I felt his breathing change, and I thought, this is my moment. And I'm just going to pause that right there and say that my mom came from a very abusive relationship prior to my dad. And in that moment, I thought about my mom and how she got out. And I was like, she would be very, very proud of me for getting out of this situation. So shout out to my mom. So
I'm sure she's proud of you.
She really is. I love her. So I bolted from flat on my back to the back door. I don't know how I did it. I am not fast, but I got out the back door, and I was wearing just a t-shirt, no panties, no shoes, nothing. And I started running down the road, and I do remember specifically that it was very foggy out. And it must have been, probably 4 or 5 in the morning, and it was, kind of dark, but starting to light up. And I was running as fast as I could, but he was gaining on me, and I could hear him yelling behind me. And I turned my head, and when I turned back, I kind of made eye contact with him, and he had this weird look on his face, and he made a left-hand turn into housing in between 2 houses. And I thought, well, that was weird. And then when I turned and looked forward, there was a military police vehicle just coming. I mean, they were like patrolling the neighborhood, I guess. And they saw me, and I ran straight to them. And I got in, and it was like, this isn't weird to y'all that there's a random 19-year-old girl with no clothes on running out of housing. So I can't pretend to know what someone was thinking, but they certainly didn't press. And I think I don't even think anybody really asked me what happened or if I was okay. They just said, what's going on? And I just said, I need to go home. And I shared the MP barracks. So I just said, take me back to the medic barracks. And they did. I really don't remember that conversation. They certainly didn't care enough to investigate whether they had their judgments or not, like, what was she doing in housing? And these are things I've replayed in my head many times, as an outsider. Like, it'd be easy to say, oh, I know why she was running out of housing. The wife came home, so I played this over and over in my head, thinking that was, this is my fault. I shouldn't have been there. This whole thing, so you beat yourself up about that. But I'm really still to this day missing a lot of time after that. I went back to the barracks and snuck in. It was early. It was a weekend, I believe, or maybe early that Monday morning. It's still a little fuzzy, but I did go back to the barracks. My roommate was sleeping, and I just crawled under the covers. And I think I'm missing a couple of weeks there somehow. I mean, our bodies do a really good job of protecting us and allowing us to function. I'm told later, and I'm still friends with this person today, my best friend. I'm told by her, and I still to this day don't remember that conversation, but apparently I did call her
Mhm.
and tell her what had happened. But I
Is she
still
a
don't remember that
civilian? She
conversation.
wasn't in the
She
military?
is, yeah, she still lives in our hometown. I just talked
Okay.
to her today. So yeah, we're still friends,
Mm.
and she's been through this journey with me as well. But I don't remember calling her, and I was afraid to report it because being a female
Mhm.
and being on post and being part of the MEDAC unit, we had to make a rotation through when the MPs or CID had any kind of cases like this. They required a female chaperone. And so we had to rotate through that, you know, process. So if we were on call for a certain amount of days, I don't remember, a week or so. And so if somebody had something like this to report or they needed to do a one-on-one, they needed a female chaperone, we were on call to do that. So I had chaperoned several of these reports that were being taken prior to this happening to me.
Mhm.
And I didn't want to go through that
Yeah.
because I saw how they were treated and I saw how they talked about them after they left, and it was always their fault. And a lot of times it involved young soldiers drinking and being roofied. And in my case, that wasn't the case. That was not the case. Um, and when somebody says, "Oh, you had MST, were you drinking?" No,
Yeah.
actually, I wasn't. But um, so I was too afraid to report it. But I did go back to, my clinic, and the guys I worked with were awesome, and they knew something had happened, but I never told them exactly. But they knew something was up when I said, if he comes here, I'm not here, and they did run him off for me. They ran
Oh.
him off for me many times. He came to the park a few times because I walked everywhere. It was a small post. I walked.
Mm.
A couple times he was at the park when I was walking by, and thankfully there were enough people around. I was able to avoid him. But in the meantime, he had befriended someone else, and I do carry a lot of guilt about that sometimes because I tried to warn her, but I didn't come out and just tell her. And
Mhm.
she proceeded to date him. And I can't speak on their story because it is hearsay,
Mhm.
but I was told later, and I'm talking, a couple of years later, that he went on to um, get her pregnant and then was kicked out of the military himself, for exactly what I'm not sure,
Mhm.
and ended up going to prison for things unrelated to this. But I was like, oh, well,
Yeah.
he kind of deserves that, in my mind. But saying that, it's like that chunk of time was just missing because you push that trauma down. So it's like it wasn't there, So I
Yeah.
just went on. I met another guy really shortly after that. And he's still married to me today.
Yeah.
So he,
Um, I want to kind of paint this picture again, just real quick, because
Mhm.
this part just blew me away when you were telling me your story. So essentially, I mean, he kidnapped you. He kidnapped
Yeah,
you
I mean,
in base housing
for a lack of definition, yeah.
of
Or
all
for the
places.
definition.
So these things are
Yeah.
happening right there in front of our faces, right? In base housing, you're running down the street in the
Mhm.
wee hours of the morning, just a shirt on, nothing underneath
Yeah.
it. Military police pick you up and they don't think anything of it, and they don't take you in to get evaluated. You know what I
No,
mean? Like, this
nothing.
is crazy to me.
It's absolutely crazy. And to be honest, at the time, I didn't think it crazy because I just wanted it to be over with and I just wanted it
Mm.
to be done. And it wasn't until years later when things progressed, which I guess I'll get to that part of the story now
Yes.
too, where all of that came up. But
Mhm.
so I met and married my husband within 6 months of all of this happening. And in his defense, no, I did not tell him until later. Um, he, I indicated to him that there was some issues, and he, you know, just said, if I ever see him, yeah, better look out, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I went into a heavy drinking. I mean, we're talking probably 7, 8, 9 years of just drinking under the intent that I was partying, but really I was just, numbing all of this stuff. So I went a lot of years where I didn't think about it. I didn't talk about it. Um, and this is the part that most MST survivors don't want to talk about because it's embarrassing and it's, okay, so now we have, sexual dysfunction. So things don't work properly for me, or I can't do it unless I have alcohol, or I have physical pain, and you can't even go there. Like all of those things really happen. Um and it's a body's response to trauma, but you've blocked it off in your mind, so you don't really know. And I didn't know any of this. So I'm just going through life thinking, okay, I have relationship problems. I'm, really suffering with PTSD type symptoms, but didn't know that that's what I had, you know. Um, so I could really spare you the details and fast forward almost 10 years because we were just kind of doing life. I had a daughter, I was in nursing school. Things were going okay. We had been going to church, like we were working on our marriage, things like that. But this underlying intimacy issue was still there. And the doctors would say, I don't see anything wrong with you. I physically don't see anything. I don't know what to tell you. And I'm thinking, and they're asking me, have you ever had trauma? And I'm telling them no. And it's not because I didn't, and not because I was lying. It was because it just was missing. That part of my story was just missing from my memory, which I know now is my body's way of just allowing me to function. And I'm thankful for that because I don't know. I mean, I had little kids to raise. What was I going to do? But so we moved to Phoenix, Arizona. And I was in nursing school and realized that I had a real problem. Physically, things were really starting to get painful. I mean, doctor after doctor, the whole story. And I was taking my third semester of nursing school, and we were taking the psych rotation. And we had a whole day in class where we were talking about military sexual trauma. And we were talking about, when people disassociate and all these different things. And I will never forget this instructor saying, if anything happens or comes up for you after this discussion, he said, it happens every year. Please come talk to me so I can get you help. And I even kind of eye rolled, to be honest, because I was like, never, and that's what happened to me. So I realized that memories started coming up for me, but it was very vague and more like, okay, something did happen to me, but like, I don't really, maybe I need to talk to somebody. But here I am in nursing school. I've got a kid. I'm married. We're having some problems. Like all these things are occurring. Who's got time for that? So you just shove it down. You just keep shoving it down, and that doesn't work. So I did find a wonderful counselor through our church, and she said, girl, you need to go see a professional. So I said, okay, I trust you. And I found this doctor that she kind of said, look, you got PTSD. This is what's going on. And I said, no, I do not. I refuse. I'm not going to admit that. This is not what's happening. And I kind of hit a wall about 3 months in. My relationships were getting better. I was learning, better boundaries and coping skills, but I couldn't connect to it emotionally at all. I could tell the story straight-faced and not even like it was just the daily news. And that's a problem because I was so detached from it. And I drove home that day and I was thinking like, I can't keep paying for this therapy. It doesn't seem to be working. And I just said a simple prayer like, God, whatever you have to do to get this to connect so I can heal, I'll do it. And I meant it. And he answered me the same day. You're not going to believe this part, but I got home and we decided to go for a walk. By that point, I was actually already graduated from nursing school and pregnant with our second baby, who is now 13. And so we went for a walk, and I was just at the therapist's office that day. And we walked around the corner, and I'm dating myself, but there was a Blockbuster Video on the corner, and we were taking the little one to go pick a movie out. And we walked around the corner. And remember I said that he'd gone to prison, right? So nowhere in my radar was I expecting to see what I saw. The weeks leading up to that, I had told my therapist, I think I'm hallucinating because I swear I'm seeing him on the freeway. I'm seeing him, in town, but I know it can't be him because he's in prison. And I had verified he was there. I looked up his Department of Corrections records because I just needed to know
Mhm.
once I recognized that, okay, I want to make sure there's no threat. And that was kind of where I was going with that.
And that's
Um,
really common. I think a lot of survivors don't typically talk about that part, but we do want to
yeah,
kind of keep track of where that person is
yeah.
to make sure they can't hurt us again, right?
Yeah. And once I had found out he was in jail, I did keep tabs on that part because I wanted to know if he somehow got out. And not even that I thought he was going to come after me again. I mean, I was on post with him after that till I left. So it wasn't like he did. I mean, he never spoke to me again once I met my husband.
Mm.
He left me alone, and he had moved on to somebody else. But um, so I knew that he was in prison and I hadn't checked in a long time. I didn't feel like I needed to, but I really thought I was hallucinating and seeing him all over the place. And because I was in therapy, I just thought it was because all of these memories were coming up. So I really didn't think that he was around, but he was. So I turned the corner, and your body really does keep the score. My body knew before my eyes even saw him that something was wrong. I froze in my tracks. I'll never forget it. There was a big tree over the sidewalk. It was hot. It's Arizona. Um, so my husband and daughter she was on her little bike and they rode up to the Blockbuster and he opened the door for them and they walked right past him and he pat my daughter on the head and I was just frozen solid on the
Oh my
sidewalk and
goodness.
everything in me was like, no, no, you don't get to do that. You do not get to touch my kid. And you're not, and I was just instantly like angry and kind of finally emotional. I've been waiting for this moment, to connect. And my body just took off. I just took off running. So you've got this weird pregnant lady running down the road. And my husband comes out. I ran across to the Sonic and I'm just there like probably looking like this. I mean, I'm frantic and hyperventilating and yelling and mad and just in my head screaming like, no, you do not touch her. And kind of just realizing like you stole so much from me.
Mm.
You stole the last 10 years of what was supposed to be normal, healthy, intimate relationship with my spouse and he's had to suffer because of you,
Mhm.
asshole. Like that's what you're thinking. Um so they're in the Blockbuster and I'm still standing out in the parking lot and he comes out. He was already leaving, he had opened the door for them to go and he was leaving and there was a woman with him and two small children that looked just like him.
Mm.
Um, I don't know who she was. I don't know. I don't know if they're married or what, but they got in a minivan and they drove away and he never saw me that I know of. And
Mm.
I I was literally paralyzed on the sidewalk. So my husband comes outside and he's like, "What are you doing?" And he sees me and realizes, okay, what's going on? So I just took off running. So we ran back home and I
You guys
finally
are
was
like,
able to
he's all like, why are we running? We're all running together. You're like, don't worry, I'll tell you
all
later, but let's all just run.
yes, and all I can remember saying is it's him, it's him, it's him. And that's all I remember saying to him. And it's funny because when we talk about it now, he's like, I honestly don't remember what you said. I'm like, I don't either. We both were just so like, what the? So I got home and I called my therapist. I had just left her office, not even an hour before. And I called her and said, uh, this is what just happened. I just, and she said, are you safe to drive? You need to come back. And, I took a minute, took a big deep breath, and I realized in that moment, like, God answered my prayer in the strangest way possible, but he did, right?
Mhm.
So I know that God is in the restoration business and that little piece of the story um, was to help start that healing journey. I wanted to be restored, and that's part of it too. Some people don't want to be healed; they just want to keep shoving it down, and that definitely was me until I could connect to it. And so I went to the therapist office, and we made a safety plan. We looked him up on her computer, and we found out the man lived 3 miles from me. Of all places, of all places.
Mhm.
So he had actually gotten out 6 or 7 months prior, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So I had been seeing him around and I wasn't hallucinating. He was there. So we had to come up with a plan like, what do you do if you see him again in person? What do you do if he recognizes you? What do you do if he strikes up a conversation? So we had to come up with all of these scenarios, like, what would I do? What would I do if I was alone, if I was with my kids? And the worst part of it that I had to really comprehend was, what if I see him and he's nice to me? What if I see him and he's like, oh, my homie? He used to talk like that, you know? So I was like, what if he literally doesn't validate anything? Like, what if to him it was nothing, which clearly it was. I mean, who does something like that? So I had to work through that too. That was tough. And then I never saw him again. And in a short time, I mean, I got his address. I was very tempted to drive through the neighborhood, but I opted not to do that for my own safety and sanity. But shortly after that, we actually not connected at all. We ended up moving about 4 hours north of there. So we moved out of the area, and that really helped propel my healing journey because like I was able to connect to it. But as anyone else who's been through therapy knows that you get stuck sometimes. So there's hills and valleys. And so I made a lot of progress, learned some coping skills, but my therapist actually, because we moved, I never reestablished with anybody else. But I had a great support network, saw some counselors off and on just to help deal with some things. But I ended up meeting you at the Catalyst retreat because as I watched my kids get older and, you know, as the years have passed by, now it's been even longer. You know, my youngest is 13, so it was almost 14 years ago that I ran into him. So over that time, you kind of just, no, I'm doing good. Yeah, I'm doing good. And you just kind of white knuckle and force your way through the next thing. And so I feel like I've been white knuckling for a while, thinking that I'm good. And so over the last year, some memories have started popping up again. And I never really acknowledged or admitted the PTSD portion of my journey. I didn't want to have that label.
Even while you were in therapy, you were just like,
No. And she
still
would
not
say,
going to accept it.
still not going to accept it. And I do remember her telling me, you're never going to heal from this until you accept it and we figure out how to work around the symptoms. She encouraged me to report to the VA. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to have anything to do with that because, not that I blame the Army. I don't blame the Army. I kind of became super soldier after all that happened because I really did love the Army and the Army life. But I was always afraid to tell people I was a veteran when I got out because the next question is going to be, oh, well, what did you do? And even though they don't know what happened to me, and I never have to say that, it was always just connected. So if I said, oh, I'm a veteran or I was in the military, because my situation happened so close to when I first got in, like it tainted all of it really in my mind, you know? So it was like, I planned to be a lifer. My husband and I both were like, yeah, we're going to retire at 40 and travel the world. And, I guess God saw different, but that's okay.
I want to take you back real quick. I have a question before we move on to the next phase of your life. The one where I get to come in. I remember I was homeless in Hollywood. We've talked about this, and there was a man who was trying to traffic me when I was 16 years old. And ironically, kind of like you, we ran into him in an elevator about 15 years after I got in the military, got out, and I was with my family in that elevator as well. And I looked at him and I froze and I was like, oh my gosh. I was kind of nervous to tell my husband because I, for some reason, felt like guilt. Even though I didn't do anything wrong, I never actually did fall for his attempts to lure me, but I still had this weird feeling of guilt. Did you feel anything like that when you saw him again? Like other than the panic and the, oh my gosh, this is really happening. Was there like a little bit of guilt that kind of creeped up as well?
Yes, but not in the same way. I actually felt guilt that I hadn't done more afterwards to report him. Like because I saw that he was on the street. And then of course by then I knew what he had done to this other person that eventually did come to me and say, how did you get rid of him? And I said, you, like you. I don't know what else to say. Like so I have a lot of guilt still. Sometimes I think about that, but that was the biggest thing when I did see him was guilt that, damn, I should have I should have done something. I should have fought harder. I should have told the MPs, or I should have told my command. I should have done something to get him put away, you know?
That might have been the guilt I felt. I didn't understand why I felt that way, but now that you explain it, that might be what I
Yeah.
felt too. Like, why didn't I ever say anything, you know?
Hmm. Yeah.
So I can
And,
completely understand.
and, and I did kind of in a roundabout way mention it one time, um, right before I was going to PCS from Fort Huachuca, and I was already married. I kind of mentioned it to someone, I guess, testing the waters because
Mhm.
it was bothering me. I kind of just snuck up. And so I said something about it, and he said, well, if what, I don't know his exact quote, but basically saying that he didn't hold a gun to your head and you were with him. I
Yeah.
mean, come on. So then it's like, well, I don't have anything else to say to you, buddy.
Mm.
And if I do,
Yeah.
you're not gonna like it. So, um,
I
so
wanted to ask,
after,
oh,
Mhm.
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, so I was gonna say, I was gonna kind of, you started to talk about the Pink Beret Foundation. So that's what I was gonna ask
Yeah.
you. It's been life-changing for me. And meeting you is one of the highlights of
Oh,
being part
thank
of the
you.
Pink
Thank you.
Berets. Can I
Yeah.
ask, how did you become involved with the Pink Berets? Because that's where I think a lot of this newfound healing is also coming from.
Yes, and this is my favorite part of this whole story, honestly, is um so I over the last year or so had been starting to have flashbacks again and memories and new memories, things that I didn't remember before. And I was like, really? This is great. And I kind of, I was kind of I felt really afraid. Like I just and I know now that's PTSD. Um, and I'm getting more awareness to that and how trauma works. But basically, I just shoved everything down so far and started to do that again unconsciously, basically, just trying to um, be okay and smile in every situation. And not to say that that was fake. And I do try to leave every situation that I end up in better than I found it. I'm a nurse. I take care of people, and that's what we do. Um, but I started to have these memories again, and I had talked with my husband and said, like, look, I think I need some help, but I don't really know where to get the help. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was still carrying a lot of shame that, like, well, if I get help, I have to tell someone this story out loud. And I had shared this story with a very intimate group of friends at a women's retreat. But it wasn't focused on the military stuff. It was more just focused on this happened to me, and here's. So in the capacity that I'm sharing this story today, I've never done. And I've never been, I don't want to say brave enough. I don't like that, but I've just never felt like I've had the courage to say it, because once it's out there, it's out there. You can Google this forever, and now it's there. So I had to really think about that. I have girls to think about, and that's what it was. It was my kids. They are teenagers, 18 and 13, and I want to model for them that it's okay to struggle, and it's okay to get help, and it's okay. Um, we've had a rough couple of years, and they've put up with a lot, and I know I'm not easy to live with. um, but that's okay. They love me, and they encourage me to get help. So the Pink Berets came along because I Googled help for, I didn't know it was called MST. I just
Mhm.
Googled, help for, military trauma or whatever. And I ended up in this like YouTube wormhole of all these things, but it triggered me so hard because I wasn't ready for what I read. And when I started hearing it wasn't women's stories I was hearing, it was men. And I'm like, wait, what? And so it blew me away that this was a thing for that this is going to sound terrible, but I really thought my situation was somewhat unique. And it's naive to say that now that I actually thought that. I didn't think that what I went through was so as common as it is. And then when I found that out and started reading statistics, then I got mad, and I'm like, oh, hell no. No, I'm not going to hide this anymore. And if anybody, is going through this, they need to know that there's help out there. So I found the Pink Berets actually just through, my research there. And I've had the VA number on my desk for months, and I wouldn't call it because I just felt like, I don't know if I can do that. So I found the Pink Berets and contacted them and applied for their Catalyst retreat. And I didn't hear anything back, I guess, for a while. So I just I had even marked it off in my calendar because I just felt like I really want to go. I requested the PTO, not even knowing if I was going, because I wanted to make sure if I got chose that I was able to go. And that's exactly what happened. So I found out not even 2 weeks, I think, before the retreat that I was selected. And in the meantime, I had really been struggling, really struggling. And I have a really close, tight network of friends. I call them my tribe. But so they kind of knew what was going on in a nutshell. And so when I got accepted to this retreat, I just thought, okay, this is going to be a turning point. I knew it. So I went into it with no expectations other than open arms and an open mind of what I could walk into. I've been working on a book for a while, but it's not ready because I wasn't ready. And I realize now, because the story's not done, my healing's not done. And I was really raw at that retreat, and I met some people that were like me for the first time ever, and realized that you don't have to be afraid of a veteran service organization, especially not that one. So
Yeah.
that's when I met you, and I connected so much with your story, Janae, because we do have very similar background in some of the things we've endured even prior to the military. But and I related so much to your book. When I read that you met him in the elevator, I said, I know exactly. I was like, I know exactly how you felt like that. I felt it when I read it, you know.
Mhm.
But when I went to the Pink Berets, they have, you know, many different speakers and things, and you were one of them. And I know we were supposed to be doing equine therapy, but we were talking instead.
Yeah.
So
It was way more interesting
that was
spending time with
that
you.
was so much fun. Yes, but you really inspired me, and just I'll never forget what you said, that, you know, you help people by showing them you're healing, and you also heal by helping them. Like
Yes.
it's a relationship that has to go together. And not everybody can, you know, when you're in the throes of like mental health issues and you're working really hard to try to better yourself, it's very difficult to put yourself aside to help someone else. And some people can't do that. And I was not in a place to do that for a little while. I needed to take some time to focus on me and
Mhm.
what do I need and what does this look like for my family, because all these things are coming up and I got to deal with them either way, and
Yes.
shoving them down isn't working. So
And that
since
was one of the things we talked about also when you were telling me your story. You were like, I haven't really said it outward like this before. And you said, I'm not ready to tell my story yet. That's what you told me. I'm not ready to tell my story. I said, look, we heal through helping others, but first we have to take care of us. We
Mhm.
can't, if you try to go out and in an unhealed state
Okay.
and,
You don't want to see that.
dedicate yourself to others, like you're not fully healed. We're all going to always be on our journey.
Yeah.
But you want to be at a certain point where you feel like you can then hear other people's stories and not have it like full on trigger you.
Yes.
And that was one
Yes.
of the things I was like, okay, I'm not going to push you into that. When you're
Yeah.
ready, I would
Hmm.
love for you to share your story, but I did
Yeah.
definitely was not ready to push you into that. And
No, and you didn't. I really appreciate that. I
but
definitely. Oh,
Mhm.
go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, but since the retreat, a lot has happened. So that was
A
gonna be
lot
my
has
next thing is
happened.
like, how has life changed for you since the Pink Berets retreat, which was meant for that. It was meant to make these
Yes.
connections. And so that's
Yes.
why your
100%.
story is already like out of a movie. I mean, it's definitely something that if they're not picking up on this and wanting to write a movie about your story already, how
I
has
can't even
life
imagine.
changed?
Yeah.
It's just
Um,
surreal.
it's changed for the better, but I will tell you, the Catalyst weekend, you know, and a lot of PTSD, MST survivors, particularly, everybody's different, but I'm a stuffer and I'm the strong one. I don't cry. It's a joke in my house when we watch a sad movie or something, they all stare at me and wait for the tears to fall. And then there's nothing. And it's a joke that the Care Bear died. You know, it's kind of been an ongoing joke, but it's not funny because detachment's real. Like, you're looking at a situation and thinking, I know I should be feeling something. I want to feel something, but I got nothing. And it became kind of, I use humor a lot to cover that up. And I realized like that's not working for me. And at the Catalyst retreat, was one of the nights we had the fire. I just remember saying, it was one of the first times out loud in front of people that I knew got it and I didn't have to explain. And I just could only muster enough to say that I feel seen. Like, I don't know any of you, but I feel seen by all of you, and I was so thankful. So I had a lot to process that weekend. I had so much fun. Um, and I realized that I can breathe again. Like I was noticing, like, okay, I can breathe again. Like I was encouraged by many members of the team to seek help from the VA. I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know I could get free help from the VA for MST, and I don't have to prove it. All along, I thought I'd have to come up with some kind of, how do I prove that this really happened? Are they going to help me? So there are a lot of resources out there. I didn't know that I could call an MST coordinator. I didn't know that was a thing. So that's what I did. I got home and got to work. I got home. I sat my family down and said, here's what's going to happen. I think I need to do this. Up until that point, my kids did not know. They did not know that I had been raped. They did not know that I had been sodomized, any of those things. They knew that I had a bad relationship before my husband, before their dad. But they did not know the extent, obviously, but they didn't need to know that. So I just kind of laid it all out there, maybe not in as much detail, but they absolutely floored me with their compassion and kindness, which is exactly what I needed. And so they said, Mom, you do what you have to do. And so it took me about 2 weeks to call the MST coordinator, because I just knew that if I got that ball rolling, that I was going to have to do the work, and it's going to be really hard. And so that was mid-November. The VA does move a little slow, but I got in, had an appointment with their intake, and unfortunately their PTSD MST coordinator, or MST program that they have for veterans who are suffering this in the Houston area anyway, is backed up till March. So I wasn't able to get in with them. But the Pink Berets said, nope, you call the VA, you call the vet center. And I called the vet center, and Janine is my mentor through the Pink Berets, and she said, you call the vet center and you call them now, and so I did. I called the vet center. They called me back. I've had 3 appointments with them, and I'm currently undergoing EMDR, which is a specific therapy designed for PTSD, and her focus is to help connect emotionally to that trauma and actually process it. So I never process the emotional side of the trauma, only just the logical side of the brain. And there's so much I don't know. Trust me, I'm still learning it. But just knowing that I'm not alone, and that I don't have to put a smile on my face if I don't want to. And I'm making choices to not pretend. So if I'm not okay today, I'm not okay today. And that's been very freeing, because smiling got me nowhere. Not that that's a bad thing, and I do it a lot, but now if I'm smiling, it's genuine. And I realize that my heart has some wounds, and there's some things there that I have to work on, but I'm the only one that can do the work. I feel like when I did this work about 14 years ago, I just kind of tap danced on the edge of the flames, and like I got a little healing. I got enough to keep surviving. And my therapist just recently said, like, you need to thank yourself. Your body did what it was supposed to do, but now your brain knows it's ready. I'm still having more memories. I'm sometimes not able to sleep. There's a lot of things that I'm still working through. But I'm just taking it one day at a time. And yeah, I feel like I needed to rip that Band-Aid off, and the Pink Berets offer so much. So at the Catalyst, this is my favorite part. They have different types of therapy. So equine therapy, we did theater, which was amazing. There was just art, and we danced, but we did archery. And I'm from Texas, but I've never shot a bow. I've always wanted to. I just didn't know how to even go about it. And so Leah Coriel, which you'll hear about soon, yes, she is an Olympian compound bow archery shooter. And I met her at Catalyst as well, and was so inspired by her story and what she's overcome. And she started talking about how archery helps your brain to slow down. You can only think of the process. You can only think of drawing back, breathing, silencing everything but the steps it takes to aim at your target, and all of these different things. And I'm hearing her talk about this, and And she's talking about the racing in the head and all the things, and I'm like, what? Not everyone has a racing mind? Like, I didn't know this, but I got up there to try that bow, and I'll be danged
It
if
works.
it just worked. And I only shot it a few times that day, and I was like, I got to do this again. I have to do this again. So I got home, and one of my besties, her son outgrew his bow. I got a setup, and since then we've been adding stuff to it, and I've been practicing and taking lessons. And um, in the meantime, Miss Leah has put together the Pink Beret archery team. So
Mhm.
we're going to Las Vegas for our first competition um, in February.
That's
So
so exciting.
it's
Already, right? So much
yeah,
has happened
yeah.
in just a few
It's
months.
yes, and it's amazing because when you step to that line, there's so many parallels between archery and real life that I never even would have thought of. And now it makes sense. You know, we talk in archery about stepping up to the line and aiming and taking your shot. And it's not about where the arrow hits. It's that you stepped up to the line. And so I told myself, and with God's help, like I'm stepping up to the line every day. And sometimes I hit the paper, sometimes I don't.
You're
And
amazing.
metaphorically speaking, I mean, it applies.
I'm so
That's it.
incredibly proud of you. I know how far it has taken you just to get to this point of being able to say all of that out loud.
Yeah, it's a
Take
lot.
take the breath. Like
Yes.
you did it. And you're so don't even withhold the word brave when you describe yourself. You are absolutely very brave and very courageous. You were
Thank
that
you.
day when you got out of that waterbed and ran down the street. That's like the epitome of brave. That
Yeah.
was incredible. And who knows what would have happened if you had not done that. You know what I
I
mean?
don't even know. Yeah. Thank you.
You are incredibly brave, incredibly powerful, and I'm not surprised how well your daughters received your story because I'm sure that all of that comes from you. You may have been
Thank
going
you.
through things, but you were doing an amazing job with them, and so I'm
Thank
super
you.
super proud of you. And I
Thank you for having
love
me.
yeah, I love that you're with the archery team, and I'm so excited for you guys.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see how that progresses.
Yes. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, all the
Yes.
things. We still
Yes.
need sponsorship and support, but I'll let Leah tell you all about that. She's an incredible leader, and I can't do anything but applaud to her. Um, and she says you gotta have some self-talk here and be nice to yourself. And
Absolutely.
she's not wrong. So I'm trying.
And for those that are listening, Leah will be on for the next episode. So you guys will definitely get to hear her story as well and hear more about the archery program. Val, so I know you were initially hesitant and you've kind of said it a little bit here and there throughout, but just if I can ask again, what drove you to finally wanting to open up publicly? And then also, what are your hopes for those who hear your story?
Yeah. I think to open up publicly, it just really came from one, a really prayerful place because we live in a cruel world. I'm just going to be honest. But I cannot hold back my story for fear of what man can do to me. Somebody needs to hear this. Somebody's been through worse. Somebody's been through um, maybe something not as severe, but it doesn't matter. It affected them and they experienced it. And I guarantee you, this story is for the person that is barely making it today. And I want them to hear my voice and know that they can make it, that they can
Beautiful.
make it. And my hope would be that if somebody's struggling, that they would make the phone call and that they would get help. And if they have any doubts or reservations about, um, the biggest thing is you worry about people thinking you're crazy or, something like that. But once the story is exposed to the light, what can the dark do? It's lit up. There's nothing. There's nothing. So another archery thing, I'll just share this with you. You can edit this out if you want to. But I just realized this week I was kind of just thinking about this and I really just got a visual of thinking about doing this story and like, okay, is this the right thing for me? And is this the right thing right now? I've always known I was going to tell this story. I just didn't know how. And I've always wanted to do it in a way that I felt would be cared for and sacred. And thank you for doing that, because I feel like you absolutely did that. And I knew when I met you that this connection was probably going to occur at some point. So I just honor you for that. Thank you. But
Oh, girl.
oh, don't do that. But
I
I
held on
really,
very well.
you did good. I kind of forgot what I was saying, actually. That is also part of trauma, just in case you were wondering. But with the story, I just want people to know that going forward, oh yes, it was my archery thing. So I was thinking about this opportunity and what would this look like. And initially I was thinking, what's going to happen afterwards? I don't want to read the comments. I'm getting all in my head about it. And I just took a minute and I just pictured, all the arrows that get thrown at you in life in general. And if you're spiritual at all, we talk about, the enemy having arrows that he can throw at you, and you have the shield of faith to block those things. And I just pictured that in my mind, the armor of God. And if God is for me, who can be against me? And if he can stand between me, if he can stand in front of me and take all the arrows that are going to come my way for this, if it helps somebody else, then I'm happy to let him stand in front of me and take
Very
those
beautiful.
arrows. So
Absolutely. Very
I don't know
beautiful.
if that made sense, but that's
It does.
that's
It
how
makes
I
sense.
think about it.
It makes sense. And I don't think it'll be as, I don't think people will be as tough as I
Yeah.
know how you feel though. Like it's like this can of worms is open and,
Yeah.
but I think, once it's out there, I guess I kind of always have like thought of like, cause I held my story in for a long time as well. And I felt like now that you've put it out there, you've made it known. So it's like, they can't
Yeah.
use that to hurt you anymore because you already put it
Mhm.
out there. Right. So it's not
Yeah.
your secret anymore. Um, you're incredibly brave, and I'm honored that
Oh, thank you.
you came here. I remember when we talked, I had no idea that you'd even be ready to share it. But you were definitely one of the
Mhm.
reasons that I started the podcast, because I wanted to create that
Yeah, we
safe
talked about
space.
that.
We did,
Mhm.
right? And I was like, I feel like I need to create a safe space where people can go share their story and not have any fear of,
Yeah.
being gaslit or victim blamed or anything along that lines.
Right.
And your network of sisters is around you. So
It really is.
it's not just going to be, just
Yes.
the armor of God, but we're also going to be there blocking those
Yep.
arrows for you. We've got
Yep.
you.
Yep.
um we've talked about many times, I do believe that we heal through helping others. And I'm just so proud to see that you have found your voice and that you're now putting your whole heart into purpose,
Oh,
which
thank you.
you're truly going to continue to help others,
I
especially
hope
through this
so.
archery program.
Mhm.
I'm so proud of you.
Thank you,
Incredibly.
Janae. I'm so thankful.
I can't wait to just watch as your journey continues, because this is
Yeah.
it's the start of something new, and you're going to just in sharing your story today. I know that you're saving a lot of people, and you're going to continue to go on and do so. And I'm so, so proud to know you.
I'm proud to know you too. Thank you so much. I'm really, really thankful.
Before we wrap up, Val, I just wanted to ask, is there anything else you wanted to share with our listeners? Anything new that's coming up that you want to share? The floor is
Um,
yours.
no, I'm just so thankful for the opportunity, and I just would like to just say if anybody has experienced anything even remotely close to MST, or you're struggling with PTSD, it's real and you're not going crazy and it's not your fault, and please reach out for help. I wish I would have done it sooner.
Very good
That's pretty
advice and
much
very
it.
well said. And if people are wanting to follow your journey online, where can they
Ah.
find you? Or are they allowed to? You're like, no.
You're allowed to. I'm just really embarrassingly difficult to find. I don't function well in the social media world, but I'm on Instagram under SnarfyRN. It's a long story, but it's SNARFYRN. And
Perfect.
you'll find me there. That's about it. Send me a message.
And I'm sure lots of people are going to be interested in following your journey and also following the Pink Berets archery team, which you're on. So they'll be able to
Yes.
find you there as well.
Yes. And I think that they even have an app for the actual Vegas competition where you can follow the team and the scores and stuff. And we'll post that on social media too. So y'all can find that.
That'll be awesome. Well, thank you so much, Val, for
you.
being here.
Of course.
And one last thing for our listeners, I just want to remind you guys that no one owes you anything in life. People tend to act in their own best interest. So when they fail you, don't take it personally. You take ownership of your own life, just as Val has, and transform yourself from a victim into a victor. It is never too late to take the first step towards becoming the hero you have always needed. Thank you for spending time with us today, and we'll see you again soon.
This has been a recording of the Perfectly Flawed podcast, and we thank you for listening. The Perfectly Flawed podcast is produced by Janae Sergio. You can purchase Janae's heroic book, Perfectly Flawed, A Veteran's Journey from Homeless to Hero, on Amazon or perfectlyflawedbook.com. Look for us on Facebook and Instagram at Perfectly Flawed Podcast, and on Twitter at P_FLWD_podcast. Make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay up to date for when new episodes drop.